So for those of you who are not familiar with how the custom mechanical keyboard hobby or community works, is that one of the things about it is it really tests your patience. What I mean by that is when you join a group buy or a pre-order and you paid your hard-earned money, hundreds to thousands of dollars on a particular keyboard or keyboard components, you still have to wait several months to sometimes over a year to finally get what you paid for. And you can imagine it can make a lot of people very anxious during this waiting period. Or if you're like me, you're just itching to want to build something nice. So how do I fill that time when I've pretty much paid a lot of money and still waiting for my stuff to come in? Well, I decided to try and customize and mod some pre-built keyboards. So I'm going to start with the Corsair K65 Mini. It's a 60% keyboard. It's one of Corsair's newest products. So I'm going to basically play around with this thing and just really go all out and completely rebuild it from the ground. So one thing I have to say is that, as a disclaimer, this is not a review. This video is also not sponsored by Corsair. They did not send me this keyboard. I did not send myself this keyboard. I went out and bought this with my own money, and this video is not a review. It is just me testing my crafting skills and my modding skills as an artist, and customizing a pre-built keyboard and seeing what the result is before and after, how it affects sound profiles, the feel, and everything. So let's get started and see what we can do with it. Before we jump into the main portion of the video with modding, here's a quick spec overview of the Corsair K65 Mini so we know what we're working with. It's a 60% gaming keyboard that's currently going for about $110 US at the time of filming this video. Package contents include the keyboard itself, instructions manual, a detachable braided USB-C cable, extra escape key, extra spacebar without triangles, and a keycap puller. The Corsair K65 Mini is tray mounted within a plastic case, comes with Cherry MX Speed linear switches, double shot PBT keycaps, and of course, dynamic lighting effects, key assignments, macro programming, and all that good stuff when you hook it up to Corsair's IQ software. It's got a really thin bezel all around to optimize that super compact form factor, and weighs in at a very light 565 grams. So now that we have some basic info about the K65 Mini, let's jump into what the video is really about: custom modding. Tools I'll be using will include the Hakko FR301 desoldering gun, TS80P soldering pen, a Kester 6337 solder roll, and a soldering tip cleaner. Pretty much your basic soldering essentials. I'll have links to the tools and parts down below in case you are interested in doing any of these keyboard mods yourself. The first thing I did was, of course, remove all the keycaps, and then I proceeded to unfasten the 11 screws that hold the plate, PCB, and bottom case together. Once all those are out, the plate and PCB can now be removed from the tray for disassembly. Using the Hakko FR301 desoldering gun made desoldering the switches very easy compared to the more budget methods like pumps and suckers. This process alone took maybe 15 to 20 minutes to do, which includes occasionally having to unclog the Hakko when solder builds up at the nozzle or pipe filter. Now, before I start the reassembly process, I had to test the PCB to make sure none of the switch pads were damaged during the previous steps when removing switches. All I did was connect the PCB via a USB-C cable into a computer with VIA software downloaded for key testing while touching the pads with a tweezer. Luckily, none of the switch pads were damaged and everything is in good shape. Taking a look at the stabilizers first, we see that these are plate mounted. There's some factory lubed under the wires and stem housing, but it's not quite enough for me. On the top side of the PCB, you'll notice that there's unlubed contact between the stem and housing, which will result in a rattling noise when pressing your longer keycaps. Easy fix is just lube between the stem and stabilizer housing where there's contact with Krytox 205 grade 0 using a fine tip paintbrush. Now for my choice of switches, I went with drop Holy Pandas that I already lubed with Krytox 205 grade 0 and the springs with Krytox 105. These were not my first choice, as I originally wanted to go with Gateron yellows that were lubed and filmed because they are linear and are much more preferred for gaming than the tactile Holy Pandas. Holy Pandas were the only compatible switches I had that would work on the K65 Mini PCB due to the fact that it only takes 3-pin switches. If I wanted to use 5-pin switches, I would have to clip 2 of the legs to make this work, which was something I didn't want to do just yet, since I want to preserve my Gateron yellows the way they are for future projects. During this switch installation process, I inserted some switches starting with corners and edges of the plate, which makes it easier to line up with the PCB when sandwiching them together. Then I just filled up the remaining slots with more switches. Once this step is completed, I started soldering the switches in with my TS80P soldering pen. As for modding the case, there's a lot of empty room inside which gives off echoing and reverb when it comes to sound profiles. It also enhances the sound of spring ping in the previous stock Cherry MX switches that came out of the box. I went and bought some very affordable neoprene foam from Amazon, laid out the K65 Mini tray, and trimmed out a piece that matched the dimensions for the bottom of the case. I also added a couple more layers on top as well, filling any gaps I possibly could to reduce the void space and increase the density of the keyboard, which aims to bring a more deeper and muted sound profile once this is finished. Once I was satisfied with my foam layout, I reinserted the PCB and plate on top, secured it back in with the screws, and then I threw the default keycaps back on. The final build ended up adding about 30 grams to the overall weight, coming out to 591 grams on my scale. Here's a quick sound test of what it sounds like before and after the mod. Alright, so here are my final thoughts and conclusion on my custom K65 Mini keyboard here. And let's talk about the mods that I did. How did it affect the final build before and after? Okay, so starting with sound profile, the neoprene foam that I added underneath the PCB to take out a lot of the void space, it helped deepen the sound of typing. It made it sound a little bit bassier and deeper. And the two terms that you'll often hear enthusiasts in the hobby talk about is thock versus clack. So this is not a thock to me. This is a clack. And so it's basically a deep bassy clack. And let's talk about the keycaps that I kept on here, which is basically the default double shot PBT keycaps that came out of the box. And I also tried putting in my GMK double shot ABS keycaps on here. And to me, those actually sound very, very similar. It's not much different. But in terms of the long term, which type of keycaps would I keep on this keyboard like this? Well, for me, the form factor, 60% is a gaming keyboard to me. This is not something that I could use personally in terms of general workflow, video editing, and other like work type activities I do. I would need something like a TKL size. So 60%, this is strictly a gaming keyboard. That being said, gaming keyboards I tend to go a little bit rough on, as most people do. I'm going to keep double shot PBT keycaps so that they have the durability, the legends, and the texture get preserved for as long as possible. This is not something that I would put my expensive GMK keycap sets on here. So overall, I think I am pretty happy with this build. The only thing that I would that I would do differently next time around is, I think sometime down the line, I'm going to desolder these Holy Pandas because they are tactile switches. And being a gaming keyboard, I do prefer linear switches. So at some point, I probably want to desolder it, put in some lubed and filmed tangerines or something like that at 62 grams, and use those as my primary gaming keyboard and gaming switches. So yeah, pretty much happy with this build so far. And let me know what you guys think about my custom modding here. What other keyboards would you like to see me mod? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, I really appreciate you watching and stopping by. Thumbs and subs if you want to see more content from me, and I'll catch you next time.